Dictators banning laughter, lakes that can burn your skin, and modern-day piracy. And that's just the beginning. Get ready, because these are 50 of the most dangerous places on Earth. Starting off with number 50, North Korea. Okay, North Korea isn't high on bucket list destinations. After all, if you go, you're begging to be detained and used as an object of propaganda. It's so dangerous that your passport isn't even valid to travel there. You'll need to get a special passport to visit Pyongyang, and it's probably for the best. Kim Jong-un is so tyrannical that he banned laughing for 11 days during the anniversary of his father's death. Number 49, Afghanistan. There are very obvious reasons not to travel to Afghanistan. The place is run by religious fanatics who don't like to laugh, and there's the constant threat of war and terrorism. That's why the State Department has it on its do not travel list, because the last thing you'd want to happen is to see yourself kidnapped or wrongfully detained by the Taliban. Number 48, India. India seems like it should be safer, but that depends on where you are. The State Department advises tourists to exercise increased caution throughout the country and to not travel there alone. That goes double for women, who are often subjected to verbal and physical harassment. The border with Pakistan, Jammu, Kashmir, Manipur, and portions of Central and East India are all on the State Department's do not travel list. Violent conflict and elevated crime are constant threats. If you're determined to go, maybe just stick to the Taj Mahal. Number 47, Russia. Across the Eurasian landmass lies Russia, a place full of natural and man-made beauty. Unfortunately, it's not a good idea to see those things today. Things have changed dramatically since Vladimir Putin decided to conduct a special operation and invade Ukraine. The State Department puts the entire country on its do not travel list. Foreigners face high risks of wrongful detention. You probably don't want to become one of those people put on a show trial behind a glass case. Number 46, Ukraine. Ukraine isn't an ideal place to travel today either, but the war will end eventually. Before you bolt to become one of those first post-war travelers and see the state of the country, consider this. Ukraine now has more landmines than any other country. Then there's the millions of unexploded artillery shells and cluster bomblets lurking in its soil. These explosives stretch over a swath of the country as big as Florida. Be careful if you decide to go even decades from now, because these things can last for a really long time. Number 45, France and Belgium's Western Front. During World War I, the Western Front stretched across France and Belgium, where over 1 billion explosive rounds were fired, and up to 30% of them never detonated. In France alone, 900 tons, 816,000 kilos of unexploded ordnance are still recovered every year in what's known as the Iron Harvest. More than 600 workers have lost their lives trying to clean it up. Near Ypres in Belgium, you might even stumble across a crusted-over gas shell, still deadly after more than a century. It might sound exciting, but trust us, these fields are the last places you want to explore alone. Number 44, Egypt. Egypt has more landmines than any other country, with almost 23 million buried in its soil. World War II and repeat wars with Israel up to 1973 have left blankets of these hard-to-find anti-tank mines in the Western and Sinai deserts. They've already killed or injured thousands, with more still to be discovered. And Egypt isn't the tourist trap that's plagued with mines. Number 43, Cambodia. Angkor Wat in Cambodia is one of the world's most famous structures, but this country only recently emerged from a pretty dark history. It's seen war and the tyranny of regimes like the Khmer Rouge, all of which laid down landmines, around 8 to 10 million of them. Over 40,000 Cambodians suffered amputations from these mines between 1979, when the Vietnamese overthrew the Khmer Rouge, and 1999. That meant 40 victims per week. Number 42, Laos. The most heavily bombed place in the world isn't anywhere that first comes to mind. Maybe you're one of the growing number of tourists interested in a trip to Laos, which the European Council on Trade and Tourism named one of the best places for its architecture and history. But Laos was part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail in the Vietnam War, and the US military dropped over 270 million cluster bomblets all through it between 1964 and 1973. 80 million of them failed to explode on impact. They're still killing or maiming people. So if you plan on going to Laos, walking through an unguided area isn't a good idea for that livestream you have planned. Mines and unexploded bombs make the past a still present danger. Unfortunately, many other countries are suffering much more active dangers from criminals running amok. Number 41. Venezuela. Venezuela's murder rate hit a high of 90 per 100,000 in 2015. That's fortunately dropped to 26.2 in 2024, but that's still one of the world's highest, and the danger is greater than that. The country is a corrupt dictatorship under Nicolas Maduro, with arbitrary enforcement of local laws and a high risk of wrongful detentions. That's why the State Department outright advises Americans to not travel to it. Number 40. Mexico. Mexico's cartels have become so powerful that they're now using improvised landmines. The cartels have made Mexico the fifth most violent country in the world, with 24.9 murders per 100,000 people in 2023. So if you're going to Mexico, it's best to stick to the major tourist areas and avoid the places the US State Department issues advisories on. This includes Mexico City, which travelers are told to exercise caution in. Number 39. Honduras. Honduras' homicide rate is even higher than Mexico's, at 31.4 per 100,000. That's why the US State Department lists the entire country at level 3. The urge to exercise caution comes from the high violent crime rate and local authorities often lacking the resources to deal with it. If you do want to go there so you can say you've visited a place of danger, it's best to avoid demonstrations, displaying signs of wealth, and generally going out at night. Number 38. South Africa. South Africa is the most dangerous country on the African continent, with a homicide rate of 45.5 in 2023. The State Department doesn't advise to avoid traveling there, but it does recommend elevated caution. It would also be best for you to stick to major highways, avoid being alone after dark, or flaunting your wealth. It's also advised to stay away from obscure townships. Number 37. Ecuador. Ecuador is the second most violent country in the world, at 45.7 homicides per 100,000. The State Department says it's best to exercise elevated caution here. Many parts of the country should be avoided entirely due to widespread crime. These places include the cities of Quevedo, Quinsaloma, and Pueblo Viejo in the province of Los Rios and Esmeraldas, and one more city that we'll mention shortly. Sure, Ecuador's northwest coast might be picturesque, but crime is high and law enforcement lacks resources. Keep that in mind before you want to get those shots of Las Palmas and brag about how you went to one of the world's most dangerous beaches. Number 36. Jamaica. In 2023, Jamaica was the world's homicide capital, with 49.3 murders per 100,000 people. That's why it's been listed as a place to reconsider traveling to. Tourist areas are safer than other parts of the country, but even in gated resorts, the State Department warns about incidents of armed robbery and sexual assault, with slow law enforcement response times and cases rarely referred for prosecution. Maybe you want to go into the less traveled areas to say you risked it, but Washington says it's not a good idea. Number 35. Haiti. Haiti's homicide rate is 41.1 per 100,000. Granted, that's lower than Ecuador or Jamaica, but the State Department outright lists the entire country as do not travel. Recent political turmoil that toppled the government and an already high crime rate have combined to make it so dangerous that even personnel from the US government are banned from traveling anywhere at night or going to a bank. And if you want to visit the border with the Dominican Republic, that's not a good idea either. It's a hotspot for kidnapping. Number 34. Kansas City, United States. After hearing about all these travel advisories, you might think you want to stay in the United States. But America is a much more violent country compared to its developed peers, at 5.76 homicides per 100,000. This is where it helps to remember that crime isn't uniform. Some places are more dangerous than others, that skew the national average of every country. Kansas City, Missouri is one of those places for the US, with a rate of just over 1,700 violent felonies per 100,000 in 2019. Number 33. Detroit, United States. Detroit is another famous city. Unfortunately, the home of the American auto industry has fallen on tough times. Its population fell by 63% between 1950 and 2015, and it had almost 2,000 violent felonies per 100,000 by 2019. So if you want to see the history of the American automobile, just remember to exercise elevated caution. But the crime capital of the US is far to the south. Number 32. Memphis, Tennessee, USA. Memphis is known for the likes of Elvis and Johnny Cash, but there's a darker side to the city. It had 63 homicides per 100,000 residents in 2023. If you go, you have a 1 in 49 chance of being a victim of violent crime, and cuts to police funding haven't helped. So while the State Department won't say anything about it, just be sure about where you're traveling if you want to pay homage to the home of some of the greatest artists in blues and rock. There are far more dangerous cities abroad, and you might not be surprised to find them in countries you've already heard us mention. Number 31. Nelson Mandela Bay, South Africa. Nelson Mandela Bay is the most dangerous city in Africa, with a murder rate of 78.3 per 100,000 people in 2024. High unemployment, widespread poverty, and easy access to firearms fuel the presence of criminal groups that are challenging for law enforcement to suppress. And it gets worse across the Atlantic Ocean. Number 30. Guayakil, Ecuador. Guayakil, Ecuador's largest city, has a murder rate of 88.8 per 100,000 people. Organized criminal organizations compete for drug trafficking routes here, and the violence has spilled out. Although local law enforcement has intensified its effort against these criminals, fundamental conditions like widespread poverty and lack of resources for police have allowed the gangs to make a good living anyway. Number 29. Caracus, Venezuela. The State Department already told you to avoid Venezuela, but the Caracas area is especially one to steer clear of. There were 90 homicides per 100,000 people here in 2022. The rates soared as gangs and Maduro's security forces had a turf war for the city's neighborhoods. Let's just say you wouldn't want to run into either one. Number 28. Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Across the Caribbean, Port-au-Prince skews Haiti's national homicide rate into the stratosphere. With 117.2 murders per 100,000 people, it's one of the 3 most dangerous cities in the world. Armed gangs fight for control of territory here, with kidnappings and sexual violence also far too common. Local authorities are handicapped by political turmoil, so this is an area that's probably worth avoiding. Number 27. Colima, Mexico. Of the 10 most dangerous cities in the world, 7 of them are in Mexico, and 1 stands out even by their standards. It's Colima, in the state of the same name. The murder rate here is 140.3 per 100,000 in 2024. Colima is along a major narcotics trade route, where the stuff gets imported into the country. It's also in the territory of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, one of the most powerful and dangerous gangs in Mexico. It's a cartel superpower, capable of fighting wars against multiple rivals at once and the Mexican government. But sometimes it's not the crime that makes a city dangerous. Number 26. Lahore, Pakistan. Check the live rankings in the World Air Quality Index, and you're sure to find Lahore, Pakistan as one of the most polluted cities in the world. That's because it's chopped down most of its trees to build roads for an increasing number of cars. Mix this with an energy grid that relies heavily on coal and dust from construction projects, and you get air that's often hazardous to human health. Not all dangers are man-made, though. There are plenty of natural wonders out there waiting to threaten you. Boiling heat, bitter cold, and much stranger things are out there lying in wait if you're not careful. Number 25. The Danakill Desert. This is the Danakill Desert between Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. Aside from a few Afar people that are brave enough to mine for salt, no one comes by these parts. If you mean to join them, just know that you're about to venture into the hottest place on Earth, which can reach up to temperatures of 131 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 55 Celsius. That's because this desert is a volcanic depression, with underground lava lakes that make the area reek of rotten eggs. The smell comes from sulfur, and there are far more toxic gases here. Maybe it shouldn't be surprising that the most famous resident is Lucy, a fossilized human ancestor that died over 3 million years ago. Number 24, Dal Ethiopia. There's a certain part of the Danakill Desert that was inhabited only by foreigners, because the locals, they knew better. The ruins of Dal was where Italian and American companies mined potash. It was the hottest inhabited part of the world while they were there. The average temperature in Dal is 94 degrees Fahrenheit, 34 degrees Celsius. You can only get there by off-road vehicles or camels, and they have to carry salt, not you. So be prepared to pay a lot of money to a guide if you want to visit this most extreme of ghost towns. Number 23, Lake Natron, Tanzania. Other parts of Africa are more hospitable, and there's some stunning lakes on the continent worth visiting. Lake Natron in Tanzania probably isn't one of them, though. This lake is one of the most alkaline places in the world, with pH levels that can go over 10 thanks to high concentrations of sodium carbonate and other minerals. That means the water can burn your skin and eyes if you come into contact with it. If that's not enough for you, the temperature rivals that of the Danakill Desert. Number 22, Oyakon Russia. Oyakon in the Sakha Republic of Russia's Far East, the opposite of Dal. Common high temperatures during the winter months are in the negative 30s and 40s Fahrenheit. Only the interior of Antarctica is similar. If you want to spend a winter here, you better be prepared. It's so cold that indoor plumbing freezes, so the 500 or so residents use outhouses. And don't go if you're a vegetarian. Crops can't grow here since the ground is frozen, so you'll need to rely on a meat-based diet. Number 21, Teracina Brazil. Teracina Brazil seems to be the opposite of Oyakon. Average temperatures here reach 97 degrees Fahrenheit, 36 Celsius in the summer. But the real danger isn't the heat. Instead, you might have a better chance of being struck by lightning here than anywhere else. Tropical conditions make it the center of Brazil's flash lightning flatlands, the place with the world's third highest number of recorded yearly lightning strikes. If you're willing to risk that, you should be aware that it's also a crime haven, with 40.4 homicides per 100,000 people. Maybe you should get that lightning footage somewhere else. Number 20, Amazon, Brazil. If you're in Brazil and want to get away from the cities, you might fancy a journey through the Amazon, but maybe it's better to think again. Sure, the place has stunning natural beauty, but you had better be prepared to see it. Pack a lot of mosquito repellent, sleep in a mosquito net, and get your vaccinations: malaria, meningitis, rabies, and a lot more. If you're still okay with all these needles in your arm, you should be aware of the venomous snakes, other predators, and potential for floods and forest fires. If you're still willing to put up with all that, plus the enormous heat and humidity, don't go without an expert guide. The dangers in the Amazon are obvious, but sometimes places are dangerous precisely because the dangers aren't obvious. Number 19, Oklahoma City, USA. Consider Oklahoma City. It might not seem like a place of extremes, but the 680,000 residents live there in the knowledge that their home is at the center of Tornado Alley, the place where most of the world's tornadoes happen. Over 160 of them have hit Oklahoma City since records began in the 1890s. That's why most people have built shelters into their homes. Official shelters would just clog the roads with traffic in an emergency. Remember that if you're going there to chase a storm, especially in the spring. Number 18, Jakarta, Indonesia. Halfway around the world, you'll find Jakarta, Indonesia, with a population of 11.6 million. But this sprawling city has a huge vulnerability. Nearly half of it is below sea level, and it's sinking between 2 and 3 inches a year. Flooding happens pretty much every year now. That's why the city is building a huge seawall. Until then, it's best to avoid the more easily flooded northern part of town during bad weather, especially when you learn about the sewage system that can't cope with the water. Number 17, the Philippines. A little further north is the Philippines, and there's something peculiar about this country. It's in the Ring of Fire, a 25,000-mile, 40,000-kilometer long, 310-mile, 500-kilometer wide belt that almost surrounds the Pacific Ocean. The 4 biggest volcanic eruptions since the end of the last ice age have been here. The Filipino city of Legazpi is right along the ring, and Mount Mayon is partly within the city's borders. It's a popular tourist spot, and it's also a highly active volcano. Eruptions are so common that the city has no choice but to have elaborate evacuation plans. 16,000 residents were displaced just in June of 2023. Number 16. Tokyo, Japan. When you think of Tokyo, you might think of the word safe. But at some point, this place will be the most dangerous city in the world. There's something else about the Ring of Fire. 90% of the world's total earthquakes, and the biggest ones, happen here. That's why there's one in Tokyo almost every day. These are mostly small, but a 6.6 magnitude earthquake took place in 1894. When, not if, a bigger one hits, it will be devastating. You'll probably be fine for now, just remember that under your feet, disaster could strike at any time. Number 15. Cook Strait, New Zealand. The Cook Strait is the passage that separates the north and south of New Zealand's main islands, but it's only 14 miles, 22.5 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. That sounds like a lot, but the lay of the land makes this place a wind tunnel. Sometimes the wind can reach extremes of 150 miles an hour, 240 kilometers an hour. The wind and strong tides mean that there's little room for error here. Even experienced sailors have to keep a close eye on the weather conditions. One mistake can mean a meeting with the jagged mountains lining the shore. Number 14. Skeleton Coast, Namibia. Namibia's Skeleton Coast is pretty similar. There are over 500 shipwrecks here. A local park ranger documented 112 in just 6 years. It's often foggy, and Antarctic currents flow up, producing an energetic coast that can take you 125 miles, 200 kilometers out if you're daring enough to risk a swim. It sounds like a surfer's dream, but you'll be sharing the waters with one more danger. There are a lot of sharks that look for the common marine mammal life there. Number 13. The Cape of Good Hope. The Cape of Good Hope is only slightly further south. It might be one of the world's most important shipping routes, but that doesn't mean it's safe. Waves of 16 feet, nearly 5 meters, are common here. You also have a good chance of running into an intense storm. There are at least 2,000 shipwrecks. Ever heard of the Flying Dutchman? That ghost ship is associated with this place due to its intense conditions. Number 12. The Southern Ocean. Go a little further south and you'll come across the Roaring Forties and Furious 50s. As most of the landmass is in the northern hemisphere, there's little land to slow the movement of the powerful currents here. The winds average a monthly speed of about 39 feet per second, 12 meters per second in the windiest parts. The combination whips up waves at an average of over 16 feet, or 5 meters. Number 11. Cape Horn. Cape Horn is where the Atlantic and the Pacific meet. Few sailors dare to go to this place they call a ship graveyard, or the world's largest natural obstacle course if they're in a better mood. High winds make for waves that can be almost 100 feet, 30 meters high at maximum, with jagged cliffs that await ships that venture too far off course, something that's all too easy to do in the powerful currents here. No less a navigator than Sir Francis Drake had a close call at Cape Horn. If anything, he had a tougher time here than he did against the Spanish Armada. Number 10. The Bay of Biscay. The Spanish Armada needed to sail through the Bay of Biscay to reach England, and it had a lot of trouble. The strong waves strained the seams of the ships, and some of them were leaking before they even entered battle. You might think navigation has made progress since then, but these waters are still perilous. Strong winds and sudden storms pose constant dangers, especially between April and October. This is when gale force winds and sudden storms combine with strong currents to tip ships over or send them into the rocky outcrops all over the place. Number 9. The Northwest Passage. No one actually succeeded in sailing from the Atlantic to the Pacific through the Northwest Passage until 1906, when Norway's Roald Amundsen did it. Even then, it took 3 years. Ice is still in both the northern and southern routes at all times of the year, with only narrow channels open at best. It might not be as treacherous as it was to those early explorers, but this is definitely not a journey you want to make without an experienced navigator. And even for them, it's a challenge. You might even run into hostile walruses or polar bears if you get stalled. Number 8. The Mosambbek Channel. If ice isn't for you, but you still want a thrill, there's the Mosambbek Channel on the other side of the world. Spanning between Mozambique and Madagascar, the channel's strong and warm current flows to the south. It creates unpredictable weather patterns and strong hurricanes, like Cyclone Idai in early 2019, one of the worst to affect Africa. And then there's something else you need to consider. An Islamist insurgency has flared up, which has threatened the ships in the channel. Drug smuggling has become big business. So if you're going there, extreme caution is warranted. Number 7. Somalia. Further north is Somalia, and you probably know what could be waiting for you there. Sure, piracy peaked in 2011, but Britain's Royal United Services Institute says the pirates were more active in 2024 than at any point in the previous 6 years, and Somali pirates operate far from their home waters. 33 incidents were reported in the first 3 months of 2024 alone. In January and March, Somali pirates boarded ships hundreds of miles off their coasts. Number 6. The Gulf of Aden. The Gulf of Aden has become one of the most dangerous places in the world for another reason. Houthi rebels in Yemen have fired on commercial shipping since November of 2023. And we're not talking with small arms or RPGs. We're talking about anti-ship missiles. Over 100 attacks were recorded by the end of 2024. Number 5. The Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is an even more important shipping route, with over 100,000 ships coming through in a year. But it's a narrow channel, spanning only 1.7 miles, 2.7 kilometers across at the shortest point. That means ships need to communicate very carefully with each other to avoid a collision. This part of the world is among the most heavily infested with pirates, even more than Somalia. It's a long stretch of territory, and law enforcement has meager resources to deal with the problems. Number 4. The Sunda Strait. On the western side of Sumatra is the Sunda Strait. It's 15 miles, 24 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, and only 65 feet, 20 meters deep at its minimum in the eastern part. The western part is a lot deeper though, and the sudden change can make for pretty tricky situations. Also, you might get hit with a freak tsunami, like the one that came in 2018 with no warning. After that, the Indonesian government advises all ships to avoid this strait, and the region's dangers don't end there. Number 3. The South China Sea. Navigating the South China Sea needs to be handled with caution. There are many small islands and reefs you'll need to be aware of, and typhoons are frequent, over 20 per year in these confined waters. Then there's the political tension. With China building fortified islands and clashing with its neighbors over valuable real estate like the Spratly Islands, it might be best for you to avoid certain areas. Chinese and Filipino vessels in particular have had hostile encounters more frequently in the past 2 years, and you might get too close to a freedom of navigation operation from the US Navy if you go in unprepared. Number 2. The Black Sea. If the South China Sea is in a state of Cold War, things have gotten much hotter in the Black Sea. Aside from storms and the narrow straits between it and the Mediterranean that create a hazard, Russia's Navy and Air Force are there to make life far more dangerous. Ukrainian ships have managed to avoid being blockaded by using new routes closer to the west coast and drones to beat back the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Still, missile attacks against Ukrainian ports continue, and the closer you get to Crimea, the bigger danger you'll be in. And finally, number 1. North Sentinel Island. North Sentinel Island is an Indian territory, and the authorities will go to great lengths to keep you out. Get within 3 miles, 5 kilometers, and you'll be prosecuted for your own protection. If you do land there, you'll meet a tribe that's hostile to all outsiders. These people, called the Sentinelese, infamously killed an American missionary that landed on the island in 2018. The Indian authorities didn't even attempt to prosecute against the Sentinelese, so don't think they'll go to bat for you either. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MapPack.